Today, I'm not here to talk about success. I'm here to talk about the moment success abandoned you. That day when the world watched you fall, when the whispers got louder than your own heartbeat, when your name became a headline, but not the kind you prayed for. Public failure doesn't just break plans, it tries to break identity. It doesn't just wound your pride, it attacks your dignity. But let me tell you something with fire in my voice and faith in my soul. Your fall was an event. It was not your identity. Just like Muniba Mazari transformed her pain into power, you and I must decide today not to erase the fall, but to rise so fiercely that the fall becomes part of the legend. This is not about revenge. This is about reclaiming your name, your worth, your voice, because dignity is not given by applause, and it is not taken by humiliation. It is reclaimed from within. When you fall in public, the first instinct is to hide, to shrink, to wish you could rewind time, delete the moment, erase the witnesses. Public failure feels like standing in the middle of a storm without shelter, while everyone watches the lightning strike your name. It is not just the mistake that hurts, it is the exposure, the vulnerability, the feeling that your lowest moment has become a spectacle. But the moment you try to run from it, it starts running your life. Owning the fall means you stop negotiating with reality. It means you stop saying, "This didn't happen," and start saying, "Yes, it did." There is a brutal strength in that sentence. No excuses, no blaming, no pointing fingers at circumstances, at people, at destiny. Radical ownership is terrifying because it strips you naked of every defense mechanism. But it is also liberating because the moment you own it, you take back control. Most people don't drown in failure, they drown in denial. Denial keeps you stuck in a loop of shame. It makes you defensive, reactive, angry. It turns every conversation into a battlefield because you feel the need to protect a fragile image, and that image becomes a prison. The more you try to protect it, the smaller you become. You start living to defend your past instead of building your future. Owning the fall breaks that prison door. It requires courage to say, "I made a mistake." It requires maturity to admit, "I miscalculated, I trusted the wrong person. I chose poorly, I failed." But that confession is not weakness. It is power in its rawest form. Because when you admit the truth, nobody can use it against you. The shame loses its weapon the moment you stop hiding it. Public failure tries to label you. It tries to reduce your entire existence to one event, one decision, one moment. And society is quick to cooperate. People love summaries. They love shortcuts. They love to compress complex human beings into simple narratives. But when you own your fall, you interrupt that narrative. You say, "Yes, that happened, and I am still here." Ownership shifts the energy. Instead of spending your strength explaining yourself to everyone, you begin investing that strength in rebuilding yourself. Instead of obsessing over who is talking about you focus on who you are becoming. Instead of asking, "How do I fix my reputation?" you start asking, "How do I fix my character?" Reputation is external, character is internal. When you own the fall, you stop performing for applause. You stop trying to look strong. You become strong. There is a profound difference. Looking strong is about perception. Being strong is about integrity. And integrity begins the moment your words align with the truth of your actions. Owning the fall also means studying it, not obsessing over it with self hatred, but examining it with responsibility. What did this teach me? Where was I arrogant? Where was I careless? Where did I ignore warning signs? Growth is impossible without reflection, and reflection is impossible without ownership. Blame feels lighter in the short term. It gives you someone else to point at. It protects your ego. But in the long term, blame steals your growth. Because if it's always someone else's fault, then you never change. And if you never change, you repeat. Ownership interrupts repetition. When you declare, "This was my fall." You also declare, "This is my comeback." You take authorship of your story. You refuse to let critics write the final chapter. You understand that while you cannot control what people say, you can control how you respond. And response is where dignity is reborn. There is humility in ownership, but it is not humiliation. Humiliation is imposed by others. Humility is chosen by you, and humility is magnetic. People may judge you for falling, but they respect you for standing up with honesty. Authenticity disarms judgment, transparency builds trust, and trust once rebuilt is stronger than an illusion that was never tested. Owning the fall also protects your mental health. When you live in denial, your mind becomes divided. One part knows the truth, the other part is trying to suppress it. That internal conflict drains energy. It creates anxiety. It creates fear of exposure. But when you accept what happened, your mind becomes unified. There is no secret war inside you. There is peace and truth, even when the truth hurts. This does not mean you celebrate the mistake. It does not mean you minimize consequences. Ownership is not about pretending the damage is small. It is about facing the consequences with maturity, paying the price, repairing what can be repaired, apologizing when necessary, making amends where possible. Responsibility is the currency of redemption. Public failure can feel like the end of credibility, but credibility rebuilt on honesty is unshakable. When people see that you do not hide from your errors, they begin to see depth in you. They see resilience. They see growth. They see a human being instead of a performance. Owning the fall requires emotional discipline. Your pride will resist. Your ego will scream. It will tell you to defend yourself, to justify, to argue. But growth often begins where ego ends. And every time you choose responsibility over pride, you strengthen your character. There is a quiet confidence that emerges from ownership. It is not loud. It does not need validation. It simply stands firm in truth. That confidence says, I fell. I learned. I am rebuilding. No drama, no excuses, just clarity. And clarity is powerful. When you own your fall, you stop being a victim of circumstance and become a student of experience. You stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? That shift transforms pain into preparation. It transforms embarrassment into education. Your fall is a chapter. Ownership, make sure it is not the title of your life. Every great comeback begins with brutal honesty, not with motivational quotes, not with public declarations, but with a private decision. I will not run. I will not hide. I will not lie to myself. I will stand in the truth of what happened and grow from it, because the moment you own the fall, it loses the power to own you. The most dangerous thing about public failure is not the event itself, it is the identity you attach to it. One mistake becomes I am a failure. One rejection becomes I am not enough. One scandal becomes this is who I am now. And without realizing it, you allow a temporary event to become a permanent definition. But an event is something that happened. An identity is who you are. Confusing the two is where dignity begins to collapse. When something goes wrong publicly, the mind immediately starts building a story. It replays the scene, it magnifies the reactions, it interprets the silence, the comments, the looks, and slowly that story turns into a label. Careless, incompetent, embarrassing. The more you repeat the label internally, the more real it feels, not because it is true, but because repetition creates belief. Separating the event from your identity requires mental discipline. It requires you to pause and say, this is something I did, not who I am. That distinction sounds simple, but emotionally it is one of the hardest battles you will fight. Because shame does not whisper, it screams. It tells you that you are the sum total of your worst moment. But you are more than a moment. An event has context, it has circumstances, pressures, blind spots, emotions, and timing. Identity, however, is layered. It includes your values, your intentions, your growth, your resilience, your humanity. When you reduce yourself to one incident, you ignore the complexity of your own story. You compress a lifetime into a snapshot. Imagine taking one frame from a movie and declaring that it explains the entire plot. That is what you do when you fuse failure with identity. Public failure intensifies this confusion because other people participate in the labeling. Society is quick to categorize. It is easier to say he is irresponsible than to understand the pressures he faced. It is easier to say she is incompetent than to acknowledge the risk she took. When those external judgments echo your internal fears, the fusion becomes stronger. That is why separation must begin internally. You must learn to observe the event objectively. What exactly happened? Strip it down to facts. Remove the emotional exaggeration. Remove the catastrophic language. Replace I ruined everything with the specific reality of what occurred. Precision weakens shame. Vague, dramatic self talk strengthens it. There is power in saying, I made a poor decision in that moment, instead of, I am a poor decision maker. The first leaves room for growth, the second locks you into a fixed identity. Identity should be rooted in values, not in incidents. Ask yourself, what do I stand for? What kind of person am I committed to becoming? If integrity is your value, then one dishonest act is a deviation, not your definition. If excellence is your value, then one failure is feedback, not your identity. Values guide direction, events test them. When you separate the event from your identity, you also protect your confidence. Confidence is not the belief that you never fail. It is the belief that failure does not erase your worth. When worth is tied to performance, every mistake becomes a crisis. But when worth is intrinsic, mistakes become lessons. This separation does not remove accountability. You can acknowledge harm without condemning your entire being. You can apologize without self destruction. You can accept consequences without accepting a distorted identity. Responsibility says, I did this. Shame says, I am this. The difference changes everything. Your brain is wired to seek consistency. If you start believing you are a failure, your behavior will unconsciously align with that belief. You will hesitate more, you will doubt more, you will avoid risks, and ironically, you may create more failures, not because you are incapable, but because your identity has been compromised. Protecting your identity protects your future behavior. Separating the event from identity also allows for compassion. You would not define a friend by their worst day. You would not look at someone you love and say, this mistake is all you are. Yet you do it to yourself. Self compassion is not self excuse. It is recognizing that being human includes imperfection. Public failure can feel like a spotlight, exposing every flaw, but a spotlight does not define the stage. It simply illuminates one area at a time. You are more than what was illuminated. There are strengths, sacrifices, and victories that the public never saw. Growth begins when you say, this is part of my story, but it is not my identity. That sentence creates breathing room. It creates psychological safety to improve. If you belie, ever you are broken at your core, why would you try? But if you believe you made a mistake, you can correct it. The event may have damaged your reputation temporarily. It may have cost you opportunities. It may have altered how some people see you. But none of those external shifts have the authority to redefine your internal essence unless you grant permission. Reclaiming dignity requires guarding that permission fiercely. You are not your worst decision. You are not your loudest criticism. You are not the headline, the rumor, or the viral moment. Those are events in time. Identity is built over time. And what is built over years cannot be erased by seconds unless you surrender it. Every day after the fall is an opportunity to reinforce who you truly are through your actions, through your consistency, through your commitment to growth. Identity is not declared once, it is demonstrated repeatedly. And as you continue to act in alignment with your values, the event slowly takes its rightful place as a lesson, not a label. When you fail publicly, the noise is immediate, opinions multiply, messages arrive, conversations happen without you and about you. Some people analyze, some exaggerate, some judge, some pretend to care while secretly enjoying the spectacle. The volume can become overwhelming, and if you are not anchored, you begin to measure yourself by the loudest voices in the room. Noise is external, purpose is internal. The problem is not that people talk. People will always talk. The problem begins when their voices become louder than your own convictions, when criticism overrides clarity, when commentary replaces conscience. That is when you start making decisions based on fear of perception instead of alignment with purpose. Silencing the noise does not mean controlling what others say, it means controlling what you absorb. After a public fall, your sensitivity increases. Every comment feels sharper, every look feels heavier. You may start scanning social media, replaying interviews, rereading messages, searching for evidence of how badly you are perceived. That behavior feeds anxiety. It trains your mind to prioritize external validation. And the more you consume the noise, the more distorted your self image becomes. Noise is rarely balanced. It amplifies extremes. The harshest critics speak with the most confidence. The most superficial opinions spread the fastest. The quiet, nuanced perspectives rarely go viral. If you build your identity on that chaotic feedback, you will constantly feel unstable. That is why purpose must be louder. Purpose is the reason you started before anyone was watching. It is the internal calling that existed before applause and criticism. It is the mission that gave meaning to your effort. Public failure can distract you from it. It can make you obsess over reputation instead of contribution. But if you reconnect with your purpose, perspective begins to shift. Ask yourself, why did I begin this journey? What problem was I trying to solve? Who was I trying to serve? What values was I trying to embody? Those questions cut through the noise. They bring you back to center. When purpose is clear, criticism becomes information instead of identity. You can evaluate feedback without being destroyed by it. Some noise contains truth, some criticism reveals blind spots, but you can only extract value from it if you are not emotionally drowning in it. Anchored in purpose, you can ask, is there something here I can learn? Instead of, does this prove I am worthless? Silencing noise also requires boundaries. Not every platform deserves your attention. Not every debate deserves your response. Not every accusation deserves your defense. Constantly reacting drains your energy. It keeps you in servile mode. Purpose, however, requires creation, not constant defense. There is strength in strategic silence. Sometimes the most powerful response is disciplined focus. While others speculate, you build. While others criticize, you refine. While others replay your failure, you rehearse your improvement. Noise thrives on reaction. Purpose thrives on action. It is important to distinguish between constructive counsel and chaotic commentary. Trusted mentors, honest friends, and experienced advisors provide perspective rooted in care and wisdom. Random spectators provide opinions rooted in limited context. If you give equal weight to both, you distort your growth process. Choose carefully whose voice earns access to your mind. Amplifying your purpose also means revisiting your standards. Public failure can tempt you to lower them, to play small, to avoid bold moves, but purpose often requires courage. It demands that you continue, not cautiously shrinking into invisibility, but thoughtfully rebuilding with integrity. The goal is not to prove critics wrong. The goal is to fulfill your mission with greater depth. When purpose becomes louder than noise, your emotional stability increases. You stop checking constantly to see who approves. You stop tailoring your actions to please everyone. You accept that misunderstanding is part of visibility, and you choose alignment over popularity. Noise is reactive. Purpose is intentional. Noise pushes you to respond quickly, defensively, emotionally. Purpose invites you to respond thoughtfully, strategically, calmly. Noise is concerned with image. Purpose is concerned with impact. When you operate from noise, your decisions fluctuate with public mood. When you operate from purpose, your decisions are guided by long term vision. Public failure can distort your vision. It can make you forget the bigger picture. One setback feels like the entire story, but purpose stretches beyond a single moment. It connects your present struggle to a larger narrative. It reminds you that this chapter, as painful as it is, exists within a broader mission. Silencing the noise is also an internal discipline. Sometimes the loudest critic is your own mind. Internalized voices of judgment can be harsher than any external comment. You replay mistakes, you imagine worst case scenarios, you predict rejection. That internal noise can paralyze you more effectively than public criticism. To quiet it, you must practice intentional thought. Replace catastrophic thinking with grounded reflection. Replace assumptions with facts. Replace self attack with self correction. Mental discipline is not denial of reality, it is refusal to exaggerate it. When you amplify your purpose, daily actions regain meaning. Work becomes more than damage control, it becomes contribution. Effort becomes more than image repair, it becomes alignment. You wake up not asking, how do I look today, but how can I serve today? That shift restores dignity. Purpose does not eliminate criticism, it contextualizes, it does not erase noise, it reduces its authority. The world may continue to talk, opinions may continue to circulate, but when your focus is anchored in why you exist and what you are building, external chaos loses its power to dictate your internal state. You cannot stop the noise from existing, but you can decide which voice guides your steps. And when purpose speaks louder than criticism, your path becomes clearer, steadier, and far less dependent on the unpredictable volume of the crowd. After public failure, a narrative forms quickly. People create their own versions of what happened. They fill in gaps with assumptions. They simplify complexities into digestible conclusions. And if you remain passive, that narrative hardens. It becomes the lens through which everything you do is interpreted. You cannot control every story told about you, but you can influence the one you live. Rewriting the narrative with action is not about public relations, it is about personal evolution. Made visible, words alone will not shift perception. Apologies without change sound rehearsed. Promises without discipline feel empty. Action is the only language that restores credibility over time. The first rewrite happens internally. Instead of repeating, "This ruined me," you begin to say, "This redirected me." Instead of seeing the failure as an ending, you frame it as a turning point. That internal shift fuels external behavior because the story you tell yourself determines the energy you bring to your next step. Action must be consistent, not dramatic. Grand gestures may attract attention, but quiet discipline rebuilds trust. Showing up on time, delivering what you commit to, improving your skills, seeking feedback, correcting patterns. These daily behaviors seem small, but they accumulate. Over time, consistency challenges the old narrative more effectively than any speech. If the narrative says you are careless, become meticulous. If it says you are unreliable, become dependable. If it says you lack discipline, become structured. Do not argue with the narrative. Outgrow it. Let your behavior create cognitive dissonance in the minds of observers. Let them struggle to reconcile who you are becoming with who they thought you were. This requires patience. Reputation damaged quickly is repaired slowly. There will be moments when you feel frustrated, when you think, why can't they see I've changed? But rewriting a narrative is not about forcing recognition. It is about embodying growth regardless of who notices. The process refines you even before it convinces others. Action also brings clarity to you. As you work, build, and improve, you begin to see yourself differently. Confidence returns not because people praise you, but because you witness your own discipline. Self respect grows when your behavior aligns with your values consistently. There is also courage in visible effort. After public failure, it feels safer to stay quiet, to avoid risk, to minimize exposure. But rewriting the narrative requires participation. It requires stepping back into arenas where you might be judged again. Not recklessly, but bravely. Each responsible risk you take challenges the idea that you are defined by your past. Do not try to erase the old chapter, integrate it. Let it inform your decisions, let it sharpen your awareness. When you speak about your journey, acknowledge the failure without being trapped by it. Transparency combined with evidence of growth is powerful. Over time, actions reshape memory. People begin to associate your name not only with the fall, but with the comeback, not only with the mistake, but with the maturity that followed. The narrative evolves because you evolved, and evolution is something no critic can permanently suppress. When it is demonstrated daily through disciplined, aligned, undeniable action, rising privately is easier. You can heal in silence, rebuild in isolation, regain strength where no one sees your struggle. But rising publicly after a public fall requires a different level of courage. It means stepping back into the same spaces where you were questioned. It means allowing people to witness not just your failure, but your resilience. Unshakable dignity is not loud. It does not demand attention or sympathy. It walks back into the room with calm eyes and steady posture. It does not pretend the fall never happened. It simply refuses to be reduced to it. When you rise publicly, you communicate something powerful. Without saying much, you show that embarrassment did not exile you. You show that criticism did not paralyze you. You show that your worth was never dependent on flawless performance. That quiet return unsettles doubt more than any defensive speech ever could. There will still be whispers, there may still be skepticism, but dignity does not argue with every voice. It remains consistent, it remains respectful, it remains focused. You greet people with composure, you work with excellence, you carry yourself with self control. That consistency becomes your statement. To rise publicly with dignity is to accept visibility without fear. It is to understand that courage is not the absence of memory, but the decision to move forward despite it. You do not rush to prove yourself. You do not shrink to avoid attention. You simply stand, act, and continue with integrity visible in your behavior.